And we are recording now.
Hello, my name's Lee Licorice and I'm here with Karen Ford-Wilson. And if you haven't seen our previous video, our conversation on the law, we've decided to come together and discuss certain aspects of law. And Karen, being skilled in that area, has a really good way of simplifying the law in you could say layperson terms.
I'm going to do my best.
Yes, indeed. And I found it very helpful when she helped me get over some hurdles of misunderstanding that I was having, and we decided to do videos. So if you haven't seen our first video, please go and have a look at that. But what we're going to be talking about today is what is law, and we need from because I'm a legal novice, I could do with a bit of groundwork and some explanation on how the system works. So Karen, if you could
Thanks, Lee. Okay, so I'm Karen Ford-Wilson, and if you want to check my credentials, go back onto our first video, and I won't spend any more time on that than I just have. I think what we've decided to do, and part of what spurred us to do this in the first place, was to focus on the Coronavirus Act. Now, this isn't a webinar, it's not a lesson, and it's not specific individual legal advice. I want to qualify that. What we hope it is, though, is an informative and educated discussion about how the law works, about what the powers are that are conferred by it, and what your rights might be. And we hope that that will inspire further discussion and questions, and also be a way to sort of alleviate some of the dryness of looking at law. And I mean that in the sense of law is a very interesting subject for a lot of people, but when you actually start reading the law and looking at the specific laws, that is incredibly dull and dry. And perhaps that's a really good start, because what I would say is that reading law and checking regulations is probably most like reading the terms and conditions when you sign up to something or buy something on the internet or whatever, and you get pages and pages and pages of terms and conditions in small print using language that, if you actually read it, sometimes I've read those terms and conditions and thought to myself, oh my God, this is rubbish. There's actually so many issues and problems with those terms and conditions.
Yeah.
But in truth, can't really say nobody, but most of us don't read them. And in a way, therein lies the problem with this, because the legislation around coronavirus is so extreme and so sudden, obviously, because coronavirus is so extreme and so sudden. We're not going to talk about opinions or any politics here at all. So, and that's another note. If you are going to give us a question, we really hope you will. Please don't ask me or Lee to assert our own, and I'm saying this, we might have different views, but it's not a joint thing in that way, but we will not, we've made an absolute pact with each other that we will not discuss our personal or political views on here, because that will just cloud the issue and it will stop you from being able to perceive this in a way of integrity and truth.
Indeed.
So back to where I was at. There's an awful lot of misconception going on, and it's not surprising. I think it's really fair and objective to say that the government announcements have been quite confusing. It is confusing when you add a lot of new laws and a lot of changes anyway, and you're trying to put them in a way which the public can understand and properly follow, and you're also issuing a sort of a policy perspective so that you can encourage people to behave in a particular way and create a sort of a culture of a certain type of behavior. Okay, and again, not making any comments about that, but just please take this at face value. So what happens then is there are guidelines, and the guidelines are how best to follow the law. The guidelines are the government and the government departments, local councils and organisations that the powers and responsibilities are delegated down to. It's their kind of obligation really to give guidance to the public. It's, you know, these laws have to be couched in terms where there is guidance on how to interpret them and how to use them, except that the guidance doesn't really tell people how to interpret them, and you can't really convert a sort of a law degree and considerable legal experience into a few sentences on how you can work out what all this means for you. Furthermore, there are quite a lot of civil liberties, you know, freedom encroaches necessarily that are involved in this law, and in certain parts of it particularly, which we are going to talk about in the next video. And those parts are being mentioned in the guidance, in the guidelines, in a language which perhaps gives a clue to the fact that they are guidance, i.e. the words should, and rather than must. But those things are guidance, and I think it's really, really important that people understand what actually is law and what is guidance, and that you can't be prosecuted potentially, or what they're using is fixed penalty notices. You can't be given a fixed penalty notice for failing to observe advice, which is what the guidelines are. Guidelines are advice. And that's not to say the advice is silly or it shouldn't be taken. It's just, it is only advice. It's not law. So enough preamble from me. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to share my screen now, and I'm going to open some documents and try and show you what I mean and identify the difference between these things, what is law and what is guidance. And I think that's a good start, and I hope that that will inspire some questions from you that will give us the material to deal with the stuff that you actually want us to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah? Is that all right, Lee?
Yeah, sounds great.
Are you with me so far? Any questions so far, Lee?
No, it's a good start. That's a good start.
Brilliant.
I mean, the difference between guidance and law is a really important issue.
It
because
is.
there
Really
seems to be a lot of confusion about that.
Exactly.
So once we kind of get a ground in and know where we're at, we can move forward.
And in a moment, you'll see why the confusion, or you'll at least have a clue as to why the confusion. So I've saved these things on my desktop. Apologies for my not very cleverly, professionally filmed things. That's not the purpose for this, is it? The idea is that we chat and we try and make it natural and all of that sort of thing. No doubt we'll make blunders, eh? Right, so let's have a look at the guidelines headed up staying alert and safe. Okay, so this is straight from the gov.uk website. It's not my work, it's just, as you can see, straight from there, and anybody can go to that site and find that, and that's where you're being directed to find out what the law actually is. However, as you'll see, it's not really clear. It is headed up here guidance. Anything that's headed up guidance is guidance advice. You know, walk this way, please, go round these barriers. That's guidance. Nobody can arrest you for not doing that. However, I should say that where there is certain guidance here, there are also pieces of law embedded in that. Okay, because don't forget, this guidance comes from the law, and the law is there to set a certain set of circumstances about. So we'll come to that in just a moment. I'm going to try and be as brief as I can, because I know our time is restricted this morning, and so we can come back to this if we need to. So the government set out its plan, and you can see there's a link there to find the plan. I'm not going to go into that at the moment. And part of this plan, people and employers should stay safe in public places and workplaces. I don't know if you can see it, actually. I think I need to move it over.
No, I can see it fine.
Okay, brilliant. By following the COVID-19 secure guidelines, okay, and that should enable people to go back to work where they can't work from home. Now, without going through all of these items in that way, here's a good example to start with. People and employers should stay safe in public spaces and workspaces. Does that mean that social distancing, as we understand it as being the stay safe thing and wearing masks and things like that, are law? No, it does not. Okay, social distancing is not law. However, there are laws to break up the number of people that you can be in contact with. And this is where it starts to get really confusing. The law allows the groups of no more than 2 people, except where it's from the same household, to be together.
Yeah.
The guidance tells you that where you are together within your rights in that law, that you must keep a 2 meter or 6 foot distance. There's a number of reasons why that would be very difficult to legislate for, to actually create law for, because you'd be relying on, you could be arresting someone for not being able to judge space very well. You know, what about blind people? Are we going to say they can't go out? You know, or they're going to have to wear those big hats that were on Facebook, because, you know, I think that was just a joke. So social distancing is guidance, and you are responsible for whether you take a risk and your perception of that level of risk with another person. However, there is a law around this, in as much as it is now considered to be a serious offence, and you know, would rightly fit within the legal definitions of assault if a person was to go up to another and cough in their face, or you know, breathe over them. So, or it could be considered an assault if somebody were to encroach in your personal space. If you said to them, please could you stand back, and they refused to, because of the risks that we understand to be associated with that, that could be an assault. So the fact is that the coronavirus law doesn't remove all the other laws and replace all the other laws.
Right.
There are some amendments and changes to other laws because of it. And the other thing that it does do, that I'm sure people are probably shouting at the screen right now, is it does kind of activate the human rights laws, particularly with regard to freedom of movement being restricted.
Yeah.
It is legally justified in doing so, we say, is the point that we're accepting at the moment. There are some challenges, but they are mainly about the way that this law has been written and rushed through Parliament. Of course, it was necessary to invoke the emergency lawmaking, you know, powers provisions, because we couldn't wait. Lockdown had to happen, and then there had to be a legal framework for that to happen, and it all came on us so fast that if we'd followed the usual kind of toing and froing scrutiny of lawmaking, we wouldn't have had a law at all, and we wouldn't have been able to do things like lockdown. We wouldn't have been able to close businesses. We wouldn't have been able to quarantine that shipload of people who came in, and those sorts of things. Okay, and these are all contained within certain parts of the Coronavirus Act, and we can deal with all of those as individual issues, and I think we should deal with them as individual issues.
Yes, yes.
But you can see here how there's language here. You should stay alert when you leave home.
Yeah.
And there's a colon there. That means this is what this means, because this is a really obscure sentence. Washing your hands regularly, maintaining social distancing, and ensuring you do not gather in groups of more than 2, except with members of your household or for other specific exceptions set out in law. Now, I think that's quite confusing, because here they're talking about guidelines, washing your hands and maintaining social distancing, but this bit here, ensuring you do not gather in groups of more than 2, is law. Okay,
right. So they're kind of mixing them up a bit.
Yes, but
right.
The thing is that we need continuous guidelines, and quite strong ones on this, because this law about the number of people you can gather with is contained in the health protection coronavirus restriction regulations that were made a day after the Coronavirus Act, which allowed the power to make those laws.
Right.
Now,
Okay.
I'm going to go now, if you'll forgive me very quickly, to the restrictions, the regulations, sorry. And you'll see the difference in the way that this is written. We won't have time to go through it all, but you will, oops, it's very
Oh, we
slow.
can certainly go through it in the next couple of 2 or 3 videos, can't we? So
yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go through it all, but basically I just wanted to show you what it was, because I'm very aware of time now. But the regulations, oops, that hasn't come out properly. Okay, let's scrap that for a moment. Oh no, is that going to, right, okay, well, we'll let it do its thing. I don't think I'm going to be able to show you properly without taking up too much time now that we don't have. But basically, you can see this is a legal document, I think, laid before Parliament and so on. This is not as powerful as the Coronavirus Act. The Coronavirus Act is what we call primary legislation, the first, okay?
Yeah.
And the Coronavirus Act is laid down in statute. That is the law, absolute, but fitting within existing laws, okay? Hence the challenges about the human rights aspects. It has to fit within existing laws. It doesn't wipe out all other laws.
okay.
There have been some amendments, but they are specifically laid out, and we'll look at those, you know, in due course. But the guidelines, the regulations, not the guidelines, sorry, the regulations, this health protection regulations 2020, it is law, but it's what's called secondary law, secondary legislation. And that means it's like an accessory to the outfit, if you like. I appreciate this is female speak, but essentially, you know, I've got my outfit I'm going out in, and I might take an accessory. I might wear, I don't know, a necklace or a pair of earrings. I am wearing a pair of earrings. These are an accessory to my outfit. They are part of my outfit, and they give a certain look, but they are an accessory.
Let's just see if I can get this right. What you're saying is, we already have existing laws.
Yeah.
But the coronavirus law that they've brought out does not overrule the existing laws we already have.
Not.
So they still stand.
Nothing does. No law that comes in new will override what we call the precedent that's been set.
Right. Okay. Now, that's an important point.
It's a very important point, because that has to be considered in lawmaking. But what's more interesting to you and I is that you know, the government can't just bring in a law which is in some way political, because it has an impact on the public.
Absolutely,
can't just bring in a law that they think is a really good idea and just stick it in there, and it's something everybody has to follow, even though it you know, it breaks lots of other laws. When that happens, that's called ultra vires, which means it's outside of the law.
Okay? Right. Okay.
And a law that's being made, I know this sounds a bit complicated, but a law that's being made that is outside the law, is not law. It's not accepted. It has to be challenged for people to recognise that it's not accepted generally. And you can ask for a review of the lawmaking process. This is called judicial review, if you are affected by it. And there are some challenges to whether the Coronavirus Act, some, you know, judicial review going ahead at the moment, that challenges the legality of the Coronavirus Act. Understandable, it would be challenged because it is so extreme and because it had to come in so quickly. Ordinarily, these laws are challenged at the point at which they're made. Okay, you know,
is it classed as legal till proven not?
It's still classed as legal, but what they might decide is that some parts of it are ultra vires because of the way they've been written and made, you know, the missing parliamentary scrutiny might have to be brought in, and there might have to be what's called an amendment to the Act.
Okay.
So acts could be amended as well as new legal situations come up, because the law is a constantly moving thing. It's there to regulate society, not for control necessarily. Well, yes, of course, a point is control, but what's made law is something that we as a society consider to be so serious and so important that living without those basic principles would be untenable and unacceptable to us, like the laws on you can't kill someone, those sorts of things. Okay, I'm using total layman's language. So we have to have a law about coronavirus, because if we don't have it, there's no legal structure for the Prime Minister, because he's not above the law, to, for example, give us our, give landlords mortgage holidays. For example, allow the banks to offer certain provisions. For example, to give self-employed people certain provisions, to relax the universal credit minimum income floor, to change there's another example of where things get changed and amended by it, to change the housing regulations, to give tenants more security in this time, and to say that no one can sort of start proceedings to evict people during this coronavirus crisis.
Right.
But also to stop the coronavirus from spreading in the way that they, with their consultations, have decided is the right way to do that. So that's the Coronavirus Act.
Mm-hmm.
The health protection regulations, which you see a little snippet of on screen here, are called a statutory instrument. An instrument is a good word. It's how you play out, if you want to use that analogy, how you play out the laws, how those laws are going to be implicated. And you need to create a statutory instrument for delegating the responsibility for enforcing law, and how to do that, what is allowed and what isn't allowed, because otherwise you'd have a situation where, let's take the police, for example, or the local authority are reading the Coronavirus Act and saying, oh, that means I should do that. Well, the regulations will tell you what it does and doesn't mean, and we will have a look at those in due course as well, as soon as maybe the next video. So that's what that's all about. So just in case that wasn't really clear, because it's a lot of information to pack in a short time, the Coronavirus Act is the primary legislation. It sits with all other primary legislation.
But it doesn't supersede any other law.
Pardon?
But it doesn't supersede any other law.
It does not supersede other laws, but it does amend some. Right. It amends some parts of them, but not all of them. And those laws that are amended are contained within the Act. I can't really show you now in a hurry. No,
I mean we'll cover that. We'll
come to that, and I will show you where it shows you each page. Will show you when you come to it. I think it's right down at the bottom, but these are all the provisions that are set out in the law. One thing I do want to do that's really important is go to the beginning, the principle of this law, because it's really important to set out the intentions and the definitions, and everything that you read after that. So if anyone wanted to go on the gov.uk website and look at legislation, they could read this themselves if they really wanted to. It is dry. But just so that you understand, everything that comes below this first bit is subject to it. So every piece is subject to everything else. You can't take one little piece in isolation and assume that it changes everything. So this just tells you it's been enacted officially. And it is for the purpose of making provisions in connection with coronavirus and for connected purposes. That is the basis of all power of this law. Okay, any powers conferred by this law are for this purpose and this purpose alone, and cannot be used for other purposes. They cannot. Okay, this law does not exist in relationship to any other thing that comes along.
Right.
Okay. It wouldn't work if we had another epidemic of some other type, or pandemic, or any other national emergency.
This is just for the coronavirus.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm not going to comment now about why. The main provisions: interpretation, meaning of coronavirus and related terminology. in this act, so in this law, coronavirus means severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus 2 or SARS-CoV-2. Coronavirus disease means COVID-19, the official designation of disease which can be caused by it.
Mm-hmm.
And a reference to this act to infection or contamination, however expressed, is a reference to infection or contamination with coronavirus. Okay? They can't suddenly use it for AIDS or something. And the reference to this act to persons infected by coronavirus, however it's expressed, does not, unless a contrary intention appears, include persons who have been infected but are clear of the coronavirus, unless they've been reinfected. Now, it's a little bit vague. It has to be, because we don't yet know all the facts about coronavirus. So we have to make space for it. And that brings me back to the regulations, which are about the bits that we can change.
Okay, before we move on and go any further into this, because it's kind of getting a little bit much backwards and forwards, if we can sort of put it out there that if you have any questions, put them in the comments below and we'll deal with them in the next video. And
yes, I just want to end that kind of talk by saying it is a lot to cover, but I just want to end that by saying there are powers given in the Coronavirus Act. They do change day to day according to the regulations, the statutory instrument that has been empowered by the Act.
Yeah.
The guidelines are advice. You cannot be arrested if you don't wash your hands. You cannot be arrested for being too close to somebody unless it's an act that you're doing to them, and then it wouldn't be under Coronavirus Act anyway, it would be under a different one. Okay?
Right, that's an important point.
So that's a very important point.
Yeah.
There's nothing in the Coronavirus Act about social distancing. However, it's also very important to set this point that employers who are asking their employees to come back to work do have a responsibility to keep their workplace safe and risk-free, and to risk assess according to anything that's new in the environment, which would include coronavirus. And that already existed, that responsibility. And if somebody suffered an injury, that would be a huge problem. But there is provision for that within the Act. Okay,
yeah, so that's something we can kind of go into.
Your rights. You have a right to say to your employer, "This is not a safe workplace."
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry, it's cramming a lot in, isn't it?
Yes. But I'm sure. Certainly with me, I've got some questions kind of bubbling in, and I want to sort of sit back and think about it, and then come back to you with some more questions.
Yeah.
So yeah, great. I mean, it's certainly a good start. I mean, this just to let everyone know, this is not a rehearse. We don't rehearse. It's just literally on the fly, on the cuff. We're I certainly am going to make mistakes, and we're just kind of putting it out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you do have any questions, please stick them in the comments. We will get to them, and if you could like and share and subscribe to the channel, because there will be a lot more videos coming down the line, and we're going to, in an attempt to keep them short and informative and to bring clarity, and that's the main thing. This legal system, it is such a complex system, and if we can bring some sort of clarity, and if you can clarify it for me, pretty much everybody's going to get it. If I can understand it, that's right. I mean, if I can kind of get my head around it, I mean, it's a kind of good thing. So thank you very much. Really appreciate
it. I know you've got a dash. I
have got a dash.
We won't know, of course, until we watch it back. But let's hope it is clear, and let's hope it helps. And any questions, like Lee said, put them in there, and we will go through this together. And hopefully we'll do something good together with your help, of course, because it will go nowhere unless you do sort of like and share it.
Indeed. Don't forget to like and share. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Lee. Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you.
Late.
Speak soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.